Hello and welcome everybody to this session as part of the Unreal Games Fellowship for creating UI with UMG and Blueprints. It's Edward Bennett. So let's jump into this. Now, we're going to be looking at different parts of the end. We're going to be looking at UMG. And UMG is, I think, when we talk Unreal Motion Graphics. Let's start off from this point. So we're going to be looking at the system called UMG in Unreal. And what is UMG? So Unreal Motion Graphics is our UI designer. UMG, which is a visual UI authoring tool that we can be used to create UI elements such as in-game HUDs, menus, and other interfaces related graphics you wish to present to the user. Now, this can be used for a lot of things: menus, full screen or pop-up, HUDs, and 3D information displays. Now, so what this is 2D space that we're working. We are creating, or actually, it's not always 2D space. The widgets themselves function as 2D. Now, usually we will map them in screen space. So that means that we're going to be placing them on the screen in a 2D space rather than within the 3D world. Now, we can actually create them within the 3D world. There is the ability to add a component to an actor, which will render a widget on it, where the widget itself can be placed in 3D space. So it's often seen, for example, I mean, it's seen all over the place, but it's seen in things like in VR, where you really don't want to be doing anything in screen space because you want everything to be within the world, because it will really throw people if you start trying to post stuff to their eyes. But in this case, we're going to be looking at it in its primary use, which will be menus, menus and HUD items. Yeah. Now, the only other things worth saying about UMG is this is written along with all of the other elements in Unreal using Slate as underpinned. So if you are capable of coding in Slate, you would be capable of extending these systems and writing sort of widgets beneath. Okay, so let's jump into the editor. I always find that's the easiest way to run with this. So I'm going to drag this off to the side. And now I fired up the vehicle template because we are going to make a mini game in this where we are going to connect the HUD display to the we're going to connect the HUD display to what's going on within the world. And we're going to create a startup menu and an end menu. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my content drawer and I'm going to dock it into the layout because I am just more comfortable that way. And also you can see what I'm doing file-wise. Now, I'm going to create a dummy one just so that I can go through and show you how all this functions. So when you're working with UMG, we are going to be working with widgets in most cases. So you can see at the bottom here of the drop down that I've right hand clicked on, we have user interfaces. Now, you know what, okay, user interfaces. And the one that we're going to be looking at is the widget blueprints. Okay, if you have had any problem getting to this point, I don't want to lose anyone in the beginning, please do throw it in the lecture notes. Should get stuff sorted out. Okay, so we're going to start with widget blueprints. Now, it comes up and it allows us to pick the parent class. I think this is a good point to mention that this really does function very similar to everything that we've been working with in in the actors and everything that we've been working with so far. These widgets do have parent classes. These widgets inherit. They have functionality, and you can hand stuff to them on spawn, and you can nest them within each other. Now, they also exist, and you can create them in memory without them being displayed anywhere. So it's as if they're off screen at any one point. So let's create one to start with, just so that we can go through the interface. Now, we only have one option off the top, and that is the user widget. There is a couple of elements that we can come in here, but these are, we're just going to start with the user widget. Sometimes I will select the canvas panel if I know that I want to work with that, but we're going to go with the user widget. This is just going to be an example. I recommend you follow along, just because, much like the other interfaces, we really want to get you used to navigating and controlling the interfaces that we're working with. Okay, so I'm going to open this up and dock it in the top right here. Now, we can go through the elements, but the first thing you'll notice that we have our equivalent of a viewport in the center here. And if I want to navigate this, I can right-hand click and I get this little hand up, and I can drag around the interface that I've got here. Now, there isn't anything else here because we don't have anything in this, and you'll find that right-hand click doesn't really add or drag anything in. So this is a little bit different to some of the other interfaces that we've been using. We only have this little hand here. Now, this is going to change the size of the container which this widget is going to appear within. Now, this is important to understand. So we're going to talk about sockets and what things are plugged into, but you will find that, like, if I was to zoom out, the options that I've got denote screen sizes in most cases. So we've got a different sort of density of screens. Now, we've even got things like we've even got stuff like sort of phones and tablets and stuff here, so that you can figure out how this would look on any of the specific screens. Now, widgets aren't always done like this, especially when you get more advanced. You'll probably be creating widgets that exist within widgets. And so we do have some options here to define a custom size, where we can just type in a size. I'm going to just fill the screen for the time being, but just be aware that this is going to denote how the screen looks. It's also quite useful for us to move it around, because what looks good at a certain ratio and size might completely fall apart and not make any sense on a slightly different size. So being able to move this about is going to indicate how your windows are going to be displayed when they are in different size boxes, be it different size screens or be it inside other widgets, effectively. So those are the main parts that we've got here. We've got some things like some snapping, and to be honest, most of the time I don't use most of these. Okay, so that is the main thing. Now, in the top left-hand side here, we have our palette, and this is something that we're going to use a lot. So unlike the other elements where I hardly ever use it, so materials, I use hotkeys really a lot, and I use the right-hand click for a drop-down. When I'm in blueprints, I'm always using right-hand click to find the nodes that I'm looking at, apart from a couple of hotkeys. When you work in widgets, within the designer, because this is the designer, I'm always working with the palette to get hold of anything that I'm looking to get. So the palette is going to give us all of our different sort of already different pre-made widgets. Now, what again, it will also give you all the widgets that are within the world. So I'll demonstrate that a little bit later on. But if I was to create a widget, I would be able to find it within this palette. So I would have to search for it, but I'll demonstrate quickly. So if I created a new widget, I'm gonna just make it a button. So no, I'll use an audio button matrix, something like that. And I'm going to call this nesting button. So yeah, it doesn't look very exciting. However, in this, if I was to search for nesting, you'd see, well, that's bringing that up. So you can see we have the nesting button here. So it's just an example of any of the widgets you create are all accessible through the panel here. And this is different because usually we would be right-hand clicking and adding elements in. Okay, so these are the palettes. We have a lot of different objects within them. Now, so this is how we get stuff. And below this, we have the hierarchy. And this is going to list all of the objects that we have on the screen. So let's give you a quick example. So if I was to type in here, a vertical box, you can see this comes under panels. Now, we've got a number of different settings, but panels are going to be, they're usually formatting options. So we've got a lot of different elements in here. But the two that will come up very quickly usually are the horizontal box and the vertical box. Because if I grab a vertical box, see, it's going to fill my entire area to start with, which would be a huge vertical box. And if I was to let's use a text. So there's a common one, a text. All it is just some text. If I was to drag the text and place it in, you can see it's going to place it at the top here. Now, if I was to drag another text and another text, you'd see that we can place numerous texts in here. But because I've selected the vertical box, it is going to stack them on top of each other. Now, I think I can replace this with a horizontal box, and you'll see that it will place them next to each other in these cases. So that's another trick. You can come in here and you can go replace with, and that's really useful because, or you can do wrap with, which will allow you to create one above it. And that's really useful because these are going to get tricky to manage. But you can see here that we have everything in our horizontal box. I'm going to change, let's keep that as a horizontal box. So the hierarchy is interesting because the parent really matters in this case. And it really, really matters as it's built into the functionality of the whole system. Parentage is, yeah, it's really important in how anything functions and comes together. So the palette is where we get our nodes from. The hierarchy is, it's like our world outliner. It tells us what we have within the world. And any of these can be renamed. They can also be locked, means you can't select them effectively. So you can see that now I can't select that. And that's quite useful if you don't want to accidentally be moving things around. Okay, so those are the little locks. And also we got visible or invisible. What's interesting with the visibility is it'll also collapse it, so it will change the layout on it. Okay, so here's the example. Now, what we've got on the right-hand side here is a details panel. Now, we have a details panel all over Unreal Engine, and as you'll know, it is contextual. So as I select something, it is going to change the details that we are seeing here. You can see. Now, there are a few different there's a couple of different sort of abnormalities, I would say, about the details panel that we have here. Now, the first one is at the top, we have is variable. Now, this is important beyond the point of if it is a variable, because when we're working with an actor, we can automatically get references to the components. But and I'll show you this quickly. We have another tab. I need this to demonstrate it. We have another tab here, which is called Graph. And if I was to select on Graph, you would see that we are now back into Blueprints. So this is something that we are very accustomed to. This is, we can create nodes. We've got a few that are existing here. Pre-construct and construct are going to be before begin play, basically. And we have tick, that's your standard tick. Okay, now what's interesting though is I have no access to any of those boxes. So I cannot get hold of those text boxes that I have because there are no references to it. However, if I was to hit is variable, now jump into the graph, you would now see I have a variable reference to that text box. And so that's the first thing that I think is very different about the details panel when we're in here. Before, if you added a camera as a component, you'd just be able to drag in a reference to it. The UMG does not work with that. If you don't have is variable ticked, you won't be able to access that. Now, there are certain things, and that makes sense because we're going to be building loads and loads of these. And it would get very confusing if we had to sort between them all. There are some elements which are variables by default, such as a button. Yeah, you can see that this is a variable. So it guesses that you're going to want to do something with a button, but you won't necessarily want to do something with text. So bear that in mind. Is variable is a important node. Now, the next element here is slots. And again, I think this is different from most of the other details panels as you're moving around Unreal, because the slot, as you can see in brackets, it says horizontal box slot. And that's because this slot is actually a reference to the parent asset. Now, and this is going to be the details of how your asset will be placed within the horizontal box. Now, I'm going to demonstrate other nodes in a little while, but this is not consistent between items. It will vary dependent on what your parent is, because you're telling it how to place this widget within the parent. So you can see, for example, if I was to grab one of these text boxes, I've got a couple of options. I could choose to fill. And as soon as I do fill, it's going to get rid of all of the extra area on the right-hand side and fill it with this node. I could also do something like add in padding. So it adds a padding around that box. So you can see there's and I could also change the alignment. So I could grab it into the middle and stuff like that. So you can play around with these, but my main point, you can also do 0.5, so it doesn't quite, I don't know, fill. It depends on, yeah, I think that weight, you need to have multiple things filling. So if I was to have two of these filling, for example, and I was to change so we got that box and I'm just going to make that full again. So we've got two boxes that are full here. I'll get rid of the padding. If I was to change one of these to 0.5, you'll see that it fills half of the space of the one that's 1. So this allows you to determine the percentage of fill. Now, I'm not expecting you to know all of this because this comes with usage, and I'm still I'm a bit patchy on this. However, what I would say is you just need to be aware of this is dependent on the parent, and this is going to be how you fit within that box. So all of these assets have the same top section, even though they're completely different widgets. So Yeah, so that's important. Now, the rest of it that we go through, again, this just goes back to your normal, like the rest of the system. These are the settings of the specific widget that you placed into the node. Okay, so let me give you an example of a different base one. So I'm gonna delete all of this horizontal box, and I am going to bring up a canvas panel. Now, I'm going to drag a canvas panel in. And the interesting thing about a canvas panel is it will change to the size of anything that we're working with. So it fills the area, but rather than being like, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now grab a button. I'm going to grab some text and I'm going to plug that text into the canvas panel. Now, this text I can place anywhere, because if we look at the slot for the text at the top here, what it's doing is we've no longer got the padding. We've no longer got the fill or anything like that, because that's not the way that canvas panels work. Canvas panels will have an anchor point and then will give you a distance, will give you a coordinate, relative coordinates from that anchor point. So this is where this becomes really useful, because if I do a drop down, you'll see that I have a number of options of where I want to anchor this. So say, for example, I wanted to anchor it in the top right-hand corner. You can see that now the position X and Y are minus 1000 and down 1000. So it's back and down. So that is the distance away from this anchor point, this kind of sun thing that we've got here. But this is where changing the size helps, because you can see if I now place this widget on a mobile screen, for example, this would be off to the left. So it would be outside of the screen. So, or what's often done is sometimes people don't, what's very commonly done is sometimes people leave the anchor like that. And then when they're making a HUD, they want to put some text in the top right-hand corner. And then they don't realize that the screen's actually going to be that large or that large. And it looks like it's in a completely random place. So anchoring means if I wanted it to be in the top right-hand corner, I probably want to anchor it to the top right-hand corner, because that's going to allow, it's going to mean it's consistently that distance from the corner. Okay, we've also got some other options here, like we can map across the entire of the top. So now I would be able to, I would have an offset for right and left. So at that point, if I made this 0 and 0, we would see that it goes across the entire screen. So that might be something that you want to do, or you could do the same thing down the left-hand side. And these make more sense if you're having like boxes that squidge up, or you have you have something like if we look at the panels, we've got a scroll box. So you might want to place a scroll box on the bottom or the left or side of the screen. Numerous sort of different setups. Just you can make it full screen. There's lots of other stuff you can do, but the main thing is you learn this by experimenting, is that this is dependent on the assets who are above it. We also have Z order here, and this is going to determine if something is placed in front of another thing. So if I was to grab, let's do a buttons. I want to get into the example, but I want to make sure that you guys have got some basics. So if I grab two buttons, oh no, I made a button within a button inception. I'm going to make this button red. That's not how to make a button red. Style, normal, tint. Okay, so if I was to change the Z order to this, it's -2, you'd see it goes behind the other. So it's quite sort of straightforward. That just determines the order that they're rendered to the screen. Okay, we've also got an animation. Now I'm just going to show you where it is, but you can key in animations. So if I come up to window and do animations, I could key in animations. I'll demonstrate this quickly, but I could create a new animation, select one of these, add it to the canvas panel. So I've got that, add in a track, usually transform for me. And I can then, I could then change the location, say to there, key that, move that forward and change that back to 0. And you see that we've got a button that runs it. And I can run that from code. Now we're not going to touch on animations, just be aware that it exists. Right. Any questions about the interface before I start jumping into the exercise? Is there any questions in the setup about the interface tool?
Ed, it was asked if there was a way to hide the anchors once you use them. Is there a chance?
To hide the anchors? Not to my knowledge. I mean,
Yeah.
they wouldn't appear on screen. If you select off something, only if you select something will it show the anchors. Am I aware of a way to hide it? Any other questions? Are we good to go? How are we doing?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. So let's start doing something with these in this case. You've got the theory, we've looked at the interface, and we can now jump back in. So I am going to delete what I've created so far because we don't need these. And it will just confuse things. So we are going to create a simple driving game, and we are going to implement a time limit and then have reusable pickup objects. So we're jumping in. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set a timer. And we're going to do this timer in, it looks like we can do it in the vehicle game mode, according to this. So I'm going to come up to the world settings, and under the game mode here, I have what our game mode is and a number of other different settings. Now you may notice that there is a HUD class in this. We are not going to use that. This is a class which is created at the beginning if need be to control, in order to make HUDs sort of modular. So you can use different ones selective. We're not using that functionality. It's some lovely extra functionality that's come in from Epic, but we don't necessarily need it. So I am going to jump up, and in the vehicle game mode, I am going to navigate to it by clicking on the Browse to Asset. So again, I selected the world settings here, and under the vehicle advanced game mode, I'm going to browse to the game mode. Now that's going to take me to the directory content, vehicle template, blueprints. And I think we are going to have to come back to this. So I'm going to create a collection. I'm going to call this stuff. Again, I'm going to go back to the game mode. I'm just going to drag that into the stuff directory. That's just so if I need to find it quickly. I might get the pawn as well because I think we're going to need that. You can see that we already have a widget there. We're not going to touch. Okay, so the advanced vehicle game mode, I will double click to open. And that is going to give us this. Now, if you've not encountered this before, that's because this is a data-only blueprint. And what that means is this is a child blueprint of the game mode base, but it doesn't have any code or components or changes made to it as necessary. All it has is exposed variables, which allows us to turn things on and off. Now we want to add some functionality to this game mode. So in order to add the functionality, we need to click on the Open Full Blueprint editor at the top here. And so this takes us back to our familiar entry. Now, I'm going to search for begin play. So event begin play. So I want to add some functionality in. And from this, I'm going to make a countdown. So, and I want this countdown to be an event which triggers every 1 second. So a way of doing that is to create a timer and make it run against an event. So I'm going to drag off of this, type in set timer by event. Okay, and that will give me the option for a set timer by event. Here we go. Now, I want this to, because we're doing a countdown, so we want this to run every 1 second. So under time, I'm going to select 1, and I want this to keep going. So I'm going to hit loop. I don't need to worry about max once per frame, because if we are running slower than 1 frame per second, we have other problems to worry about. Okay, so I'm going to now drag off the event, and I'm going to type in add custom event. And that custom event, I'm going to call countdown. Again, all of this is I'm following along with the PDF as you've seen it. So if you do find it easier to have a backup of the PDF, I should be going pretty spot on with that. And so this is an event which is triggers every 1 second. So in order to run this, I'm going to need a variable. So I'm going to add in a variable, and I'm going to call this time remaining. Now, under the Boolean, I'm going to change this from a Boolean to an integer. We're not dealing with half seconds in this. We're dealing completely with seconds. I'm going to push compile, and I'm going to set the default to, it suggests 10, but I'm going to go with 5, because as I remember when I'm demonstrating this, I have to wait for the timer to go down, and it's really annoying to have to wait. I might even go 3 seconds just to wait it count down from 10 every single time. But you can have it at 10 if you want. Now, what we want to do is we want to, every time this timer goes off, we want a -1 from the time remaining. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag in, and I'm going to hold down, I think the control key. I always get that ready. If I hold down the control key and drop, it's going to instantly give me a get. If I hold down the alt tree, it's going to give me a set. Otherwise, it will give me an option. Now, we want a -1 from the time remaining. And there is a quick function to do that. And that's, if you type in -, we'll have an option for decrement int. So it's a bit quicker than minusing 1 from it and then setting the variable. So it's just combined into a simple function. Okay, now, if we've run out of time, we're going to want it to do something else. So I'm going to hold down the B key, left click, and that will give us a branch. I'm going to plug that branch. I'm going to plug this into the branch. We've got a Boolean condition. So I'm dragging off the int, and I want to know if it is less than. So I'm going to look for less than. And 0 is correct, because I want to know when we run out of time. So, and then that is our condition. So that's all the code we need at this point. We have the time remaining variable, and we are going to be minusing one from it every second, then checking to see if it's less than 0. We'll do the other code after that point. I'm going to do a compile and save. Yeah, tell me if I'm going, they say I'm going too fast or too slow or anything. Okay, right. So next up, let's create a pickup. Let's create a pickup interface. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump back to the content drawer, and I'm going to do most of my stuff just in the general content drawer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come under Blueprint, and I'm going to create a Blueprint interface. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys have all touched on a Blueprint interface, but what it does is it functions as a means of generic communication between different blueprints. So you can send a message to a blueprint, and if it has that interface implemented, it will receive the message. If it doesn't, it just falls on deaf ears and nothing happens. And I'm going to call this vehicle interface. And then I'm going to open it up, plug it up here. So again, interfaces are quite straightforward. There are a list of functions with inputs and outputs, but with no actual data in them at all. They are just, they're just interfaces. So we're going to create a new function, or I'm going to at least rename the one that's here. And I'm going to change this to pick up object. Okay, and we need some inputs. So under the inputs, I'm going to add in 2 integers. So they're both integers. And one of them is going to be score, and one of them is going to be time. And the reason we're doing this is because we're creating pickups, which which when you pick them up, will add to your score and add to your time. So this is going to be what the pickup tells the vehicle when it does pick it up. Okay, and I'll save and compile that vehicle interface. So again, we just need to change the function name to pick up object, and we need two faces. Yeah, so we need 2. Okay, now I'll continue. So I am now going to add this interface to my vehicle. So I'll come back. Now I know I've already stuck the vehicle inside in my collection. If you haven't used a collection, you'll find this in the all content vehicle template blueprints. This is our pawn. This is the actor we will be controlling during the game. So I'll open that up, and we have all the code that is connected to the pawn. And on the left-hand side here, we have I think it's on the right-hand side, actually. We want to implement the interfaces. So we want to add the interface to this pawn. So if we come up to class settings, you'll see on the right-hand side, we've got interfaces, and it's got only one inherited, but we want to add one. So again, we are clicking on class settings in the top, and I'm going to come under implemented interfaces, and I'm going to search for the vehicle interface. And I'm going to add that in. So we can see that now on the list that we've got here. And this interface means we can use this as a method of communicating from the pickups. Okay, so right, let's put the functionality in. Now we've implemented it. Let's have the functionality in for this interface. So what I would like to do is, if we right-hand click, when we search for event pick, I'm just going to search for pick up object. Okay, so we're looking for, I think it's this one. No, I always get confused with this one. Event. Okay. Remember to compile and save. I always forget that. The interfaces are not picked up and not added in until you've saved them. So if I go event pickup object, you should see that we now have that as an option. Okay, so again, if you want to get hold of this node, we have to compile and save because interfaces are not updated until you've compiled and saved a blueprint. So this will be triggered at the point we pick up that it's sent to this. It says pick this up. So from this, we want to do a couple of things. First thing is we want a score. We want a current score. So we're going to create a new variable and we're going to call this, it's going to be an integer. So an integer. And this is going to be score. No, it's called current score. Okay. Compile starts with 0. Now, the first thing we want to do is set current score. So I'm going to drag it. I'm going to plug it in there, and you can see that we have a set for the current score. Now, what we want to do is we also want to get the current score. So, and then we want to add whatever score is coming from the interface to the current score. So you can see we are just increasing the value on the current score by adding to it. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to increase the time by whatever value is placed into the time. How are we doing for time? And in order to do that, what we're going to need to do is we're going to get hold of the time. And this is going to require the game mode, because if you remember, we placed the value for the current time on the game mode. So I'm going to right-hand click. I'm going to type get game mode. Now, the problem is that this is going to return the base game mode class. So this isn't going to have the current score in it. Because if you remember, we've got the current score and we've added it to the vehicle advanced game mode. So I'm not going to be able to drag over this and get a time remaining. So what I have to do is I have to do a cast. I'm going to do cast to the vehicle advanced game mode. Now, I know that this is going to be the vehicle game mode, okay? And I'm not going to bother with sort of making sure that this is valid or testing. So with this, I don't actually have to make this an execution pin. What I can do, why isn't that details panel looking? That's odd. I was expecting that to come up with a details panel. I'm going to convert this to a pure cast. So I'm right-hand clicking, and I have an option to convert this to a pure cast. Now, this is a bit dangerous because if we weren't using that game mode, then this was going to fail, and I haven't put in a branch or any protection from it. So it's not great, but as long as you're aware for demonstration purposes, this will be fine. So now I've done a cast, I want to get time remaining. We want to add that to the time. And then I want to set time remaining. So I'll try and format this slightly better so you can see it all okay. That's as good as I'm going to get, really. So what we're looking to do here is actually they formatted a bit better in there. We are incrementing these two values on when we have the event pickup sent across. Right. Are there any questions there before I jump on? Move on.
I think we're good.
Okay. Again, if you want to check that you can get access to this in the notes, but I am aware that if you're working on only one screen, this is difficult to follow.
Someone is asking how you added the last node.
The last node,
It a set time remaining.
the set time remaining. Okay, so what's important is, again, when we're talking about classes, this time remaining is not a variable on inside this class. So if I put time remaining, I wouldn't be able to access it because, again, it's not in this class. So this is where I need to get my reference to the advanced vehicle mode, drag off of it. And now, as you can see, actions taken by vehicle advanced game mode object reference. Now I can search for time remaining because this is a variable which is part of the class of the game mode. So I can only access it if I've already dragged off the pin so that I'm working within the context of the game mode. Just check. It's the same for time remaining here. Yeah, this is one of those things that it's yeah, you need to. I think I can lay this out slightly better if I do that. Again, it's this object oriented thing you have to get your head around. It's just sort of like everything belongs to a certain place. There are some things that you can get like universally or get pretty much everywhere, but variables will belong to a class, and therefore you have to know how to access them. Okay, do people seem fine? I'll move off this, or no, 1 second.
Yeah, I think so. No one seems to be typing.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I am going to compile. And so we're now finished with that. So we're going to make the pickup, and then we'll have a little break because I think we're doing okay with that. So we're going to make the pickup, and then we'll have a little break because I think we're doing okay. So now I'm going to jump back to the content drawer, right-hand click. I'm going to create a new blueprint class, and I'm going to use an actor. And I will call this, he doesn't give us a name, so I'm just going to call it BP_pickup. I'm going to double click on it. So now we need a couple of components. So if you create the BP pickup, we just need a couple of components. So the first thing that we need is a static mesh so that we've got something we can see. So, and the static mesh, we're going to select the shape, the torus. Shape torus. If you don't have it for some reason, just use a cube or anything else. Really doesn't matter. It's just so that we have some of visual element. I'm then going to move that up. Might be too big, but I don't have much context for this, so I'm just going to place that there and we'll change it afterwards. Now, the next thing that we need is a collision, something to detect if it is hit. And one of the things I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to turn the collision off on it because so I've selected it and I've come down and under the collision preset, I've set to no collision. And it's useful to know that's where you control the collision. Because if you're working with anything chaos and you see stuff fly off into crazy space instantaneously, it's usually if you have like a static mesh or something, you haven't turned the collision off. And so you've got the physics trying to escape something which it is tied to. And yeah, causes craziness, but just turning the collision off here. Okay, so the next thing I want to add is a sphere collision. I'm going to drag this up. And I'm going to increase in size. I'll lock that just. Okay, so this is what we're going to use in order to detect if it is being collided with. Okay, now, again, much like we did in the first one, I want to tie functionality to an event on this. So the event is when something else overlaps with this collision. So I'm going to right-hand click on the sphere, come down to events, and you can see we have on component begin overlap. So this is an event which will trigger at the point that you have overlapped with the sphere. And you get this. Now we don't want to overlap on everything that comes out because there might be other stuff moving around the world. We only want to overlap. This pickup only wants to be overlapped and function if you are on something which can pick you up. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if whatever is overlapping has implemented the interface, because we've created an interface and we'll know if it has implemented it, then that's something that can pick this up. So you can see that we've got a number of output pins on this. The one that we're looking at is the other actor. So this is the other actor which has overlapped with the sphere. So I'm going to drag off and I'm going to type in does object implement interface. Okay, and that should give us a node that looks a bit like this. Now the only input is an interface because it needs to know what interface you want to check for. So again, we're going to search for the one that we created, which is the vehicle interface. Now this has an output pin, which is going to be a Boolean. So if it does implement it, it's going to return 1, which means true. And if it doesn't implement it, it's going to return 0, which means false. So I can use a branch. If I hold down B, which is our shortcut key for branch, and left click, we're going to bring up the branch like this. And now I can drag that and connect that up like this. Okay, so we now have, we've now got, now what do we want to do? We want to send a message, and that is going to be the picked up object message. So again, I had to drag off of the other actor to get this. So again, it's really important because if I right-hand click here, it gives me the context for this actor. If I drag off of here, it gives me the context for the actor which it has received. Now, I am going to send it the message. That we have picked something up. Now, the score and the time, I'd like to be able to change dependent on what the pickup is. So I want to control. So I'm going to make variables for each of these that are instance editable. So I'm going to right click on score, create a variable, right hand click. You can see there's a promote to variable. You might not have seen this before, but it's another really useful little quick thing. If you want to create a variable for an input pin or an output pin even, you can right hand click and go promote to variable. And what's interesting is if you do it for an input pin, it's going to do a get. And say I was on here and I did it for an output pin here and I did promote to variable, it's going to do me a set. But it'll also create the variable as it's going. So it's a really useful, quick way to convert stuff. We don't need the other actor. It's useful, but we're not going to use it. Now, both the score and the time need to be instance editable. So you can see that's how that works. Now, there's one last thing that we need at the end of this, and that is a destroy actor. And so all that's going to do is it's going to destroy itself. So after you've picked it up, it's going to check to see if it can be picked up. If it is, it's going to send a message saying you picked up something that gives you this amount of score or this amount and this amount of time. And then it's going to destroy itself. So that's your full pickup sort of cycle. Now, hopefully everyone's ready. What I'm going to do now is I will test this. So I'll leave it there for a second. I will test this. And then we'll have what a 5-minute break. But if you've got questions and need to catch up, I'll field any questions. So I'm going to test this by jumping back to the vehicle map. Now I'm going to find the player start. So I'm just selecting the player start from in here and I'm pressing F so that I can get to it. I am also going to do a Control-1 so I can get back here easily. What does that say? I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so I have a pickup. Well, one of the things as well is I might set some defaults here. So the default score increases 5 and the time is 1. And now I'm going to drag in these. Now, in the details panel, if I want to change any of these values, I could change them so we have a different score and stuff like that. But I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm just going to do Alt-P to run the game. And now if I drive into them, you can see that I picked them up. This is incredibly hard to... I think I've got like a control pad plugged in or something. Let's unplug some stuff. So I can Alt-P again. Now I got something else somewhere is driving me to the right. Okay. Oh joy, that's going to make this easy. Okay. So, I don't know what the hell that is. But hopefully at the moment you'll see nothing, but you should be able to collide with them and see them disappear. Okay, I will show that code there. let's take a 5-minute break. So we will kick off at 10 past. If anyone wants to go to the toilet, grab a drink or anything like that, we will kick off to 10 or 11 past. And if anyone's stuck or if there are any questions, then I can go back and show different elements. Or how's it looking in chat?
I think it's just once you've implemented that interface call, people are kind of confused as to how that happened.
So how do I implement the interface?
Yeah.
So again, this is so in the vehicle advanced pawn, we need to pick class settings. Implements are controlled by class settings. So when I've got class settings up here, you can see that we have the we've got a drop down here. And all I've done is I've gone add into it. So I've gone add and I've searched for vehicle and it has implemented it. At that point, I can then create this event. So
And I think also how to create variables for that, for the pickup.
okay, so I will jump over. So I'll leave it there for a second
Yeah.
just to make sure that people can go between it. But I'll demonstrate it here. So what I've done is if you right-hand click, you get a promote to variable. And what that does is it will create if you do it on the right-hand side, it's going to create a new variable. Well, it'll create a new variable either way, but it'll do a set. If you do it on the left-hand side, it will, and you promote to a variable, it's going to create a new variable and give you a get. So I will delete that because that's confusing. And it's just the same as creating a variable here. It's just faster. And it also helps you make sure that you're using the exact correct type of variable. Because when you're working with like class references and stuff like that, there are a lot of them that are almost identical. I've spent a lot of time sitting there staring at two names of classes and trying to figure out what the difference is on them. So it's a great way of creating a variable that you know is of the correct class, and it instantly builds it out. So is that make sense then?
Yeah, should be good. Play.
Alberto has raised a hand. Can you check that one? Alberto, can you just ask it in the lecture notes and either it'll be communicated to me or answered depending on the question. And again, if we're looking for interfaces, it's under class settings on the right hand side.
Yeah, and then Eric's also asking, is there a way for us to visualize the incremented score?
To visualize, well, we will be displaying it in the HUD when we're coming in. So if we're thinking about visualizing it as seeing it going up and down, the other option would always be to grab it and print it. So we could do a print string here just to see that it's working. So that would display something in the top right hand corner. If you were talking, but I mean, so now, so you can see that we've now got 1 in the top left hand corner. That didn't look right actually. So good. Anyway, oh yeah, so that's time remaining. I could do the same with score. So if I compile and run. But if you meant increment, so you can see the scores going up in the top left-hand corner. And print string is always a good way to check stuff. However, if you're talking about figuring out what the increment, how the increment functions, I can break down the code for you. It was, where is it? Yes, in the pickup. No, it's in the vehicle pawn. Oh no, this doesn't increment it, does it? That's fine. Yeah, so I'm presuming that's so that way. If you want to check that your code is working, you can do it that way. Again, you need to grab it from the same get, so you could do a print after current score. But it's good to check that it's still working. Otherwise, we will do it in the HUD.
And could you also just show the game mode blueprint for a second? People just wanted to see what was going on in there.
Certainly. So just an event begin play, and we have a set timer behavior. So we have our functioning game. We just cannot see any of these details. So let's look at creating and playing with a HUD. So I'm going to come back to the content browser. I'm going to throw that in stuff, just in case I need to go back to it. And I am going to come under user interface, and I'm going to the widget blueprint. I'm just going to start with a user widget. And I'm going to call this, so it's HUD underscore UMG. And I'm going to double click to open this boy up. So we've got HUD UMG, and we have nothing in it. Now, this is something that we want to place on the screen. So the obvious thing for us to work with is a canvas panel, because canvas panel will allow us to stick things on the screen denoted from the screen. So on the left hand side we have panel. I'm going to drag the canvas panel in, and that will give us this green box. And under the hierarchy we'll have the canvas panel down on the left hand side here. Now so the interface has nothing. You don't put any functionality inside the interface. The only thing that matters is the name, so let's pick up objects, and that you have an input for score and time that are both integers. So because in a interface we are just defining a method of communication, we are just defining a name of communication and what you want to say. So they tend to be quite blank. They've got a huge panel here, which really isn't needed, to be honest. It's probably more confusing than it. Is there any well, yeah, as far as I know, there's no purpose for having this here, but it does have a big read only written on top of it. Okay, does that?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, let's move on from here. Right, so we are in the widget class that we've created. And again, so to create that, I've come under user interface, and I've selected widget blueprint, and I've renamed it to HUD underscore UMG. And that looks like this. And all we've done is dragged in a singular canvas panel. And that gives us this green box here. Now, as part of the HUD, we just want to display, the score, and we want to display the time. And for this, we're just going to use a text box. So I'm going to come up to the palette here, and I'm going to type in text. And in the second one down, we have just a simple static text widget. I'm going to drag this into the world. Now, by default, it's going to come up with an anchor in the top left-hand corner. And that's fine, because that's what we're going to use for score. Now, I want to change some of the settings. So with the text box selected, first thing I'm going to do is, if I'm going all the way down, I'm going to start off by giving it a name. So I'm going to call this score text. And I'm going to click is variable because we're going to want to update this as we go. So we're going to use is variable. Show we might be using a bind on it. Anyway, I'll check it in a bit. Now, under the text here, I'm going to change this to be score 0, 0. And that's primarily just so that we can see what this is actually going to look like. So the context is going to give us the starting text. Now under this, I have an appearance, and I want to change a couple of things, and it's going to be within the font. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to change the size to 64. That gives us a larger text for the score. And I am going to change the outline settings. I'm just going to make the outline 5. So you can see, again, the changes that I've made here is I've changed the text to score 0, 0. And I've changed the font to size 64, so it's larger. With the drop down on the outline settings, I have changed the outline size to 5. And that gives us this nice black outline around the text. There's a ton of other settings that you can have on it. You can also you can easily import other fonts so that you can make it, and that's a quick way to make it look a hell of a lot more professional. But so we have the font family, we got the outline text, and that's all good. Now, I want to do this a second time, and I don't want to change these settings again. So if you get these settings right, we'll just duplicate what we've already created. So again, size 64, outline settings 5, and we're just gonna. I've just moved this to about, I don't know, I'm going to make it 50. 50, yes. So it's just up in the top left-hand corner here. Can stretch that out if it helps, but it doesn't really matter too much. Now, I'm going to come down and I'm going to duplicate this so that I don't need to change the settings. Now, the duplication is created at 0, 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to change the anchor. So with the second one, now let's go from the top. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to time text. So that we can easily find the variable rather than just something called text box. Now I'm going to change the anchor so that it is the top right-hand corner. You can see that. And again, this anchor is dragged up to the top right-hand. And I'm going to change the position to not 50, the other. So I'm going to change it to -50 and 50. So we know that it's 50 down. Now, as you can see that this is a problem because it's off screen. And that's because if we were to look at the alignment, our alignment is 0, 0. Now I'm going to change, I think it's 1 on this side. Yeah, if I change the alignment to 1, what the alignment is doing is changing the pivot point for the widget. So if I was to have it at 0.5, 0.5, the pivot would be in the center, but at 1 means the pivot point is all the way at the right. So that allows me to get this kind of effect. Now, that is the alignment of the canvas panel slot. Now, if I was to increase the size, you can see that we've got a problem that this is now aligned to the right. And this alignment is set in justification under the appearance. So I justify it to the right. What we've got is we've now got this score this is justified to the right, and it is pivoted so that now if I move stuff around, it will always be bolted in the top right-hand corner of the screen. I'm going to change the time, change the name so it's to time. And hey presto, we have our time and score. And no matter what size screen that we are on, unless we're on a really small one, we should be okay. So hopefully everyone has that. Again, I will show. So this is the interesting one. The position is minus 50, and that's because it is the distance from the pivot point. So I wanted to move it to the left. I've changed the alignment to be 1 so that it pivots off it correctly. Right. Okay. We are going to use bindings. So I didn't actually need to make it a variable. I'm going to start with score. Now, we're going to use bindings to update these. Bindings are not always the best way of doing it. I just put a caveat before we use it. The problem with bindings is they're constantly checking the variable, but it's a lot better as the permanent way is that you update things on demand rather than constantly checking to see if it's changed and updating it. But we will use bindings. So what is a binding? So a binding, if you look where we have the text here, you'll see on the right hand side we have a drop down box that says bind. And if I come on this and I go create binding, so again, I'm going to highlight that just so that because it's a little bit hard to find. So I've selected the text box in the left hand side, and then I come down to the text. So the text is what's shown inside of it. And I'm going to create a binding. So I've done a drop down and that has create binding on it. So I'm going to hit create binding now. Just want to make sure that everyone's seen that. And that's going to bring up a blueprint that looks like this. And you can see, so this is, get score text. You can see there's a function that's created here, which is get score text. And again, what I did was select that, and I had a drop down here, which allowed me to do a binding. And so what the binding is you can see that we have an input and we have an output. And whatever we type into this returned value will come out and will override that variable. You can do bindings on multiple things. So you can see down here, anywhere that it says bind, I can bind the color to something, bind the tooltip text. God knows why you'd want to do that. But there is a whole load of, oh no, I suppose you might, if it's an interactive menu or something. But you can, so binding is an option. And it means when this updates, that will update. So if we've created a return value, we want to connect up the what's name. So what we want to do for a binding is we are looking at score to start with. So hopefully you're all at this point. And in order to make the text, I can't just plug a variable in. I'm going to want to do some formatting. So I'm going to drag off of the output pin and select format text. Again, this is context sensitive, so I will only be able to get hold of this. I think I can only get hold of this pin if I do it that way. Format text. And that gives us a little box that looks like this. Now, what's nice about format text is I can put a load of text in here, and then I can do squiggly brackets open and closed, and I can go type in other text. And as soon as I update that, you'll see that the other text has a pin which comes into it. So this allows us to format text primarily. And the text that we want to format is score, format, open brackets, value, close brackets. And so now you can see that whatever I plug into this value is going to be part of this score. So I need the current score to be plugged into this. And again, we need to know where the current score is. So we have placed the current score on the pawn for the character. So I need to get the pawn. The first thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to type in get player pawn. I've got the player pawn class, but again, I can't get score because that's giving me the base class. So I need to cast in order to get this to the correct class. Class. So I am going to cast to what was it? We're using the vehicle advanced pawn. Vehicle advanced pawn. And again, I'm being super lazy and I'm going to convert this to a pure cast. Error handling be damned. And so that is given me, I've got my pawn, I've cast it to the correct class, and now I can get the current score. See, we have the option to get current score. Again, this is contextual, so you're only going to be able to get the current score if you've dragged off of the blue line and searched for it. So we have the current score, and we can just plug that into value. So again, you'll be sick of classes and casts and everything, but once it clicks, once it makes sense, it will make everything so much easier. So that is our return node. So what this means is whenever the current score is updated, this bind will automatically update. But I think if I understand binds right, it will update on tick regardless, which is not considered a good method of teasing. You should really update it when something changes rather than just every tick. Okay, so hopefully you've got that. Got the player pawn, casting it to the vehicle advanced pawn so that we can get hold of the current score. We're plugging that into the format text, and now we have our output. Okay, do tell me if people seem to be struggling. I'm trying to go slow enough to make sure everyone catches up.
All good, it seems. Thank you.
Okay, sweet. Now let's do the same thing, but for the other side. So we're going back to the designer, and we'll grab the time. And again, we've got the text here. So with the time selected, under the text, I'm going to want to create a new binding. And you can see on the drop down, we can now see the other binding that we had, but we don't want to use that one. We need a completely new one. And I'll push the create binding button. Gives us a very similar setup. So again, let's format some text. So search for format text. And this time, this one is time brackets value. And that gives us our value pin, which comes out the other side. And so where do we have the time? Well, we have the time in the game mode. So I am going to want to get the game mode. So again, I'm going to search for get game mode. Great, we've got a simple pin, which is getting us the game mode. Move that a little bit over to the right. But again, I can't get the time because we are not in the correct class. So I need to do a cast. So I will cast to vehicle advanced game mode. I'm going to right hand click and I'm going to convert this to a pure cast. What a pure means is that we don't have the input pins. It means that this can be plugged in as an input. Now we could easily put that there, but I don't want to deviate too far from the slides. Now we're in the collect class. I can grab time remaining. Get time remaining, and I'm going to plug that in as the value. Okay, so this is all we want to do. This is enough for this HUD at this point. Got about 20 minutes left. So what I want to do now is I want to talk about how we get this to be visible. So hopefully you've done all this now. If not, again in the slides you'll find that we have step-by-step guide, so you should be okay. Now what I would do is I'm going to jump. I've saved and compiled all of this, and I want to look at adding this to the screen. Now in this example we're going to be doing it in the game mode, so again we're going back to the vehicle advanced game mode. So that's the one where we have the set timer by event, and we have this here. Now in the example we showed before, so we'll do it exactly the same as the example. I'm going to move the event begin play over to the left here. So one of the first things that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to load this widget up. If we play the game at this point, the widget is not going to be visible. So we need to do that in 2 steps. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is create the widget. So if I type create widget, we have this create widget node. I'm gonna sit on that for a little while, just because the name is going to change once we've selected the class. And this is one of those things. When we're creating or spawning classes, it tends to change the name of the node that's created it. So sometimes if you're just looking at code, it's a little bit difficult to follow along if you're just trying to grow up the code. But we're using the create widget. And that's going to add this in. Now, we need to select the class. So we'll do a drop down of the class and we type in HUD. You can see that we have HUD UMG. And so this has created the widget. Now we still wouldn't be able to see this widget. And the reason is we've just created it in memory. So the widget exists, it could be interacted with. Well, I think it might get cleaned up, but it only exists in memory at this point. Nobody can see it. So I'm going to right hand click and I'm going to promote this to a variable. We might not end up using this. I'm going to change this to, widget reference. And I'll plug this in. Now, the reason we're doing this is because this is hard to find. Like with the game mode and stuff like that, we have a get game mode and we have get player pawn, stuff like that. That means we can usually go away and find it somewhere. But a hard a widget, it isn't necessarily an easy thing to find, especially if you haven't actually parented it anywhere logically. So it's always good to save a reference because that means we're going to be able to come back and find it at a later date. Now, after we've done this, I'm going to drag off my widget reference. I'm going to add to viewport. Now, what this is going to do is this is going to make the widget's parent widget the viewport. And I'm going to plug back in the set timer by event. So we've got the widget and we've created it. And then we've added it to the viewport so that we can see it. Because a viewport can be put in, a widget can be put in lots and lots of different places, within other widgets, within interaction widgets, within tons and tons of places. But unless you put it in somewhere, you're not going to be able to see it. So that is the add to viewport. I'm going to compile and save. And now I'm going to jump back to the vehicle example and I'm going to push play or Alt P. You can now see in the top right hand corner, we have a score, and this goes up as we pick up things. You can see, and we still got the timer counting down negatively. And for some reason, my car is always strafing to the left. You can see I've scored 30 points. Yay! Okay. So hopefully you should be able to test at this point. Again, I am going to show the game mode so you can see how I have added that in. And it's those are the nodes. Okay. I'll give another 2 minutes. We're quite near the end. So what I might do is I'm going to give an example of a menu, and we might overrun by a little bit, but then I'll cut off at that point. So yeah, if you've got it working and it's up and running, can you throw it into chat? I want to get just a gist that people are working. Is it going okay? I mean, we've got a lab after this, so we'll be able to go over it in detail. Right, I'm going to continue. Hopefully you've tested and you can see the widget and it changes when you pick up stuff in the car. So let's create a game over menu. So I'm going to jump back into here. I'm going to right hand click and I want to create a new widget. When you're ready, create a new widget blueprint. And we're going to call this, I think, game over menu. Again, I'm creating a user widget. And I am going to call this game over. We seem to be using a UMG as our naming convention, so we'll do that. Okay, so let's create a game over menu, and I'm going to double click. So this is a new one. And again, I'm going to look for a canvas panel to be the background. You drag in a canvas panel and place it in the background like this. Now I'm gonna go through this a little bit faster because I know that we're going to be jumping into a lab afterwards. So primarily for the recording, it will be easier for people to follow if I just push through. So when we jump into the lab, I can answer quick questions manually, but I'm going to go a little bit faster at this point. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want is I want to have something to display at the back. So I'm going to use an image. Now, an image doesn't have to be an image. It can be just a block color, and that's how I'm going to use it. So I'm going to drag in a image. And the first thing I want to do is I want to change the anchor so that it's a full screen. So you can see in the bottom right-hand corner here, I have a full screen. And what that means is I'm going to anchor each of the corners to a value. So I want all of these to be 0. So if I do that, the image is going to fill the entire screen. Now I want to change the color. So under color and opacity, I'm going to change this to a sort of light blue. So less green, less red, more blue, and scroll down. So, okay, so that's sort of lightish blue. And that gives us our background. I'm also going to put a -1 onto the Z order because I definitely want it to be behind. We've got all the 0 offsets at this point. Now I am going to add in some text again. So I'm going to grab in text. I'm going to anchor this to the center of the screen. I'm also going to make the alignment 0.5. So if we are set at 0, 0, it will at least be in the middle of the screen. I'll do 0.5 on the other side as well. So if I've got 0.5 and I've got 0, 0, I'll know that it'll be bang in the middle of the screen. Now, again, I'm going to change the text to say game over. And I will change the size of the font to be, I don't know, we're going with 64. And set the justification to the middle. And I'm going to add outline size of 5. Okay, so we've got game over. I am now going to change the position to about -250. That drags it up. And I'm going to duplicate it. So duplicate it, and again, I want the position Y to be done, and I'm going to move it up to about -150. And I'm going to change the text to say final score because it's the final score. Now, the big difference this time is we're going to be using a button. So I will add in a button, drag it into the center of the screen. And again, it's defaulting the anchor to the top right-hand side. So I'll take it down, default it to the center. I'm going to change my alignment to 0.5, just so that I can easily place it in the center. And I'm going to increase the size of the button, change the position to 0, 0. And I am going to add some text into the button. Now I'm just going to change the text to say restart, and I'll change the color to black. So hopefully you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. And as I change the size, it should fit on the screen over quite a few different sort of size variations. So again, we have two images and a button. Right, next up, I'm going to do the bind again. So I'm sure it doesn't need to be a bind, but what I might do is I might set this on creation, because a bind really isn't something you need to do on a final score. So what I'll do is I'm going to make this a score block. This is slight deviation from the thing, but I think it's worth noting. So I'm going to make that a variable. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the graph. And I've got the score text. If I drag this in, get score text, now I can set text. If I can spell it right. Now I'm going to use the one under here under set text under the widget. So you can see I can plug that in at construction. And you can see this is better than a bind, because the final score is not going to change. So we should just set it at the beginning. I'm going to delete the tick and the pre-construction. So again, I've got the score text. I've only got the score text because I've ticked the is variable on the score text here. And so you see none of these other things am I going to be able to get a reference to, because I haven't changed it to a variable. So again, we're going to get we have to get the score. And we know where the score is. So the first thing is, let's do the format the text. Format text. And the format was final score value. I need to get the score, and I can do that by right clicking and getting the pawn. We know we stored the score on the pawn, so I'm going to get player pawn. But again, I cannot get the current score because I have no access to it here, because it's not part of this class. So I need to do a cast. And I would cast to the vehicle advanced pawn. And I'm going to be lazy again. I'm going to use a pure cast by right-hand clicking on it. Then off the back of that, I can get current score and plug that in. So I wanted to show this because it's an example of not doing it as part of a bind. It's doing it on demand. I only need this at the point that it's created. So a bind is wasteful in this instance. So what this will do is, as this is created on construction, it will get the score text, it will also get the player pawn, and it will place the current score into it. Okay, we're at the 2-hour mark, but we're pretty close to the end. So I'm just gonna make sure we got this function. Now, there's one more thing that we need to do on this widget in order to get our game loop functioning, and that is the functionality for the button. So hopefully you will have this now. Now I'm going to jump to the designer again, and I'm going to select our button. Now, button is a variable. I'm just going to rename it to restart button. You don't have to do that, but now I can either right-hand click on the restart button and find. Oh no, I can't. Doesn't have it. Okay, so if I select the restart button, I need to do a drop down to the bottom. In the details panel, right at the bottom, you're going to see events. So we want on clicked. So when you click this button, we want this to do something. So bang. And now we have a event. We have an event that's attached to it that's on clicked restart button. Now, again, if you missed that, what I did was I selected the restart button, and in the details panel, I scrolled all the way to the bottom, and then there was an on clicked, which I pushed, which created this event. Okay, now we haven't talked about input modes, and what the input mode is it controls, you can have different input modes. And the usual one is UI or game. So a UI is, say, like when you pause and you go into the menus, you would jump into UI, which would use a mouse cursor and other elements. But when you play the game, the mouse cursor disappears and you take control of the pawn. Now we can change which UI we're using. So at this point, and I think this isn't needed, because I think it would do it on the level load, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if we were to get the player controller, because the input mode is part of the class of the player controller, if I drag off, I can go set input mode. And you can see here, I've got a few options. I've got game or UI or game and UI. Now, we're going to change it back to game only, because when you push the button, the game's going to start again, and we're going to set the UI. I don't think this is important, because what we're going to do now, we are going to open a level. I'm going to choose an object reference. It uses name in what's his name, but I prefer object reference because it gives me the drop down list of all the levels. And I know the one that we're using is the vehicle example. So I'm just going to open the level by the vehicle example map. So on the button, we're just changing the input mode back to the game. Then we're just opening the level again. And so we're actually opening the level we're already in, but that will refresh the level. So that's all the code that you need on the button. We have one last piece of code to do, and we should be done. So, and for this last piece of code, we're going to want to jump back to the game mode. So I'm going to come back to my vehicle advanced game mode. And in this, right at the beginning, we created this branch on the countdown. And this branch was to determine if the value had got to less than 0. Now, what I'm going to do is, after this, we want to open up that game mode screen, and we want to we want to remove that game mode screen, and we want to display it. So first thing that we're going to have is we have the widget reference. So I'm going to drag this in. So I'm going to get the widget reference. So again, this is where we are. We're on the countdown event after the branch. We're going to do this on true. First thing we do is I'm going to get a widget reference. Now this widget reference, if you remember, we saved this when we created the HUD. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to get rid of it. So and you don't just destroy a widget. The main thing you do is you remove it from parent, and then it will get cleaned up by garbage collection. So I'm going to remove this widget from the parent. And it'll be an orphaned widget, but it will mainly, the parent is the viewport. So we are taking this widget off of the screen. Now we want to fix our game mode. Move this a little bit to the left. So again, we want the player controller. You're going to want to show the mouse. And this again is something we're controlling in the player controller. So if I go set show mouse cursor, connect that up, this is a true or false box. And we want to set it to be true because this is what's going to display the mouse cursor or not display the mouse cursor. Okay. Next up, we're going to change the input mode again. So if I go set input mode, I'm going to change this to UI only. So it's no longer going to be accepting the game inputs. So I'm showing the mouse cursor and I'm changing the input, the accepted input mode to use UI only. Finally, what we need to do is we are going to create that widget, the game over widget, and we are going to add it to the viewport so that we can see it. So I'm
If I was asking
dragging
if we can redo this step, it's okay.
this step here.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so the first thing I did was I got the widget so that I could remove it from the parent. So that was the HUD that we had before. We're just getting rid of it. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we want to change the input functionality. So I'm going to, and the input is controlled by the player controller. So I am going to get player controller. So I'm searching for the get player controller. And we've only got one player, so 0 is absolutely fine. Now, the two things that I want to change on it, the first thing I want to do is I want to show the mouse cursor because it's been hidden up to this point. And I can do that by set show mouse cursor. Now, we won't see this unless you're dragging off of the player controller. And it's part of the base class of the player controller, so we don't need to cast to anything. We know we're right. So I'm going to set show mouse cursor. Now, at the moment it's set to false, so I'm going to have to tick it to set it to true. So that gives us the mouse cursor. The next thing that I want to do is I want to change the input mode. And again, I need to pull off the player controller in order to change the input mode. So I'm going to set input mode, and I'm going to set it to UI only. So this means that it's not reading car input or anything like that. That's a reroute node, by the way. If you just double click on any line, you create this dot and it allows you just to clean up your code slightly. So those are the two settings off the player controller. I want to show the mouse and I want to change it so that we are using UI mode only. And after this, we only have 2 nodes left to do and we're done. I think I'm good to move forward.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, we've got a lab after this, so don't worry too much. The last thing that I'm going to want to do is I want to create the widget. And again, I'm going to hold on that because the name at the top changes a couple of times on this. So you need to make sure you use the create widget and search for that, because you won't be able to search for the title on the tag. So next up, we're doing a create widget. You should get this construct none. Now, in the class, I'm going to search for game, which gives me the game over UMG. And that's the widget that we just created. Now it changes to create game over widget UMB. Now again, we have only created this in memory. So we would not see anything at this point. In order to see this, I need to drag off of the return value, drop, and add to viewport. So you can see we have the add to viewport in the section here. And once we've added it in, that is just going to add it to the screen. Okay, I'm gonna move on at this point. So if I compile and save, if this is working, bang, we have our menu. And the restart does not, oh, the restart took a little bit of time, but it is working. So if I drive through the whole of them, I'm gonna have to wait for about 3 seconds. Time over. I scored 25 points. See if I can get them all. Yeah. Yes. 30 points. Top score. Man, I'm good at this game. Okay. Hopefully you have something that looks a bit like that. So back to the game mode. Those are the last two nodes that we plugged in. Either way, I'm going to hang on for a couple of seconds, but we're going to jump into a lab immediately after this so that we can answer questions. I'll just check to see if I missed anything. Yeah, I mean, in the templates, we're using levels for the startup menu screens and stuff. So you'd often jump between levels and stuff, but most of the basics are in here. There is another menu in the files, but this has covered everything we really want to go. Okay, in that case, we are over. I will catch you in the lab. Right, bye everybody.